right, I am live. Another live stream. I had to cancel yesterday's live stream because I've got this nasty cold and I still have a cold today, hence why it looks like my eyes are watering because they are. Because whenever I get a cold, I always end up with like sinus things and watering eyes and all the rest of it. So I promise you, though, I'm not crying. I'm just dealing with the after effects of a cold, but I do feel better than I did yesterday, anyways. And I'm sure I'll feel better tomorrow than I do today. This is another one of those live streams, though. I do these every Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So let's give it a bit of time. We're going to see who joins. As always, the first half hour to 1 hour, I usually spend kind of waiting to see who shows up, fielding any general questions, and then 45 to an hour in, I kind of pick a specific topic to discuss. Today, just for fun, I thought I might talk about the television show Lost from back in the day. I think it was, if I recall correctly, came out in 2005, because I think there's some interesting Lost symbolism that could connect to Freemasonry, kind of the same way a friend of the show or friend of the channels named Peter, he wrote an article for us about Masonic symbolism or symbolism from Westworld, the TV show, and The Matrix that you could apply to Freemasonry. In the meantime, let me know if you guys can hear me well, see me well, all that good type of stuff. And let's give it a bit of time. Let's see who joins. And then, like I said, obviously there's been plenty of TV shows that have dealt more directly with Freemasonry, including Sleepy Hollow, which is a show I just discovered on Disney Plus, which I want to talk more about because that talks about the Freemasons specifically. Also, The Lost Symbol by Dan Brown. That one has some Masonic connections in it as well. But in the meantime, let's give it a bit of time, see who joins us. Like I said, we'll give it about an hour before we start the specific topic. And we'll just wait for some people to join us. Say hello. Please, if you're just joining us, jump in the chat, say hello. As always, you do these streams every Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. I think I'll feel better for Saturday, Dad. I saw your message, but I haven't looked at it yet. But I will check it out later. I know co-Freemasonry is pretty big in France, so we shall see how it goes. But I'll check it out for sure. Co-Freemasonry might be worth a discussion in and of itself. So, but I think I'll feel better by Saturday. I hope I feel better by Saturday as well, because it's never fun. It's never fun traveling while you're not feeling good. Please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Let me know how you're doing. And as always, what do you guys want to talk about while we wait for more people to join? But I can see co-Freemasonry as being kind of a fun discussion altogether, because it is so big in France. Let's give it a bit more time, see who joins. Welcome. If you're just joining us, though, don't forget, please hit that like and subscribe button. I do these streams every Monday through Friday. Yesterday I missed because I am sick. I'm still feeling it today, but not maybe as bad. So hopefully I'll feel even better tomorrow. But we're here to chat about Freemasonry. The first hour, we just kind of wait to see who joins and what they want to talk about. And then we switch it over and talk about specific topics. Today's topic might be another TV show, Lost, because I've been watching it. Brad Parkinson. Can ladies and men meet together meant to a grand lodge as recognize it? Well, most places don't recognize co-Freemasonry. I believe some jurisdictions do. I mean, recognition, again, you're getting into a very long discussion as to who does and who does not what was I trying to say? Yeah, you run into, but I think most places don't recognize co-Freemasonry out of France. But I think UGLE recognizes it, to be honest. Brad Parkinson, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you. Can you discuss the difference between the emulation ritual and the York Rite ritual for the first 3 degrees? So emulation ritual, it's characteristic of lodges under the English Constitution. It's also in, for example, the Grand Lodge of Chile, which have taken as reference Masonic Regularity United Grand Lodge of England. To know the origins of emulation and the Masonic system, which belongs to go back succinctly to the beginnings of the royal art. Hold on, let me see if I can find a better discussion. See, to my understanding, emulation ritual actually has more of its foundations in operative Freemasonry. As opposed to more speculative. Standard set of ceremonies practices based on lodge reconciliations ritual used in lodges under the United Grand Lodge of England, influential in Canada as well. It is, right? Well, it is as opposed to, say, well, at least in Ontario, it is, to my understanding, as opposed to, say, Preston and Webb, which is more of the United States style of ritual. Emulation ritual, it's used under UGLE, so it came over to Canada there, though there are differences between how we practice here in Canada, at least in Ontario and England when I was there. It is under the Constitution that was produced by the Lodge of Reconciliation, formed following the union of the ancient and modern Grand Lodges in 1813, confirmed by Grand Lodge in 1816. So this has been the basis of emulation working since 1823. It has been the policy of the committee to preserve the ritual as nearly as possible in the form which was approved by Grand Lodge, allowing only those changes, etc., etc. The most notable changes when an alternative form of reference to the penalties. See, it's tough because to talk about the differences between the two, in the States, you have the 51 jurisdictions, and each jurisdiction has slightly different, um, sometimes slightly, sometimes significantly different, um, different ritual. The penalty portions are different, to my knowledge, between what you see in emulation versus what you see under the different Preston. And I'm not comparing it to Illinois. We've both been in Illinois. Um, we have. So generally speaking, and I'm not an expert on this stuff by any means. So to my understanding, based on my experience of the ritual, so certainly, for example, the idea of being able to open in emulation, you have to open on the first degree, and then you have to move up. Okay, so that should have read compared to Illinois. So one of the major differences is the ability to open in. So in Illinois, you can open like on the third degree. In emulation, to my knowledge, both UGLE and Ontario, you have to open in the first. If you want to do something in the third degree, you need to open in the first, then open in the second, then open in the third, and then close in the third, close in the second, and then close in the first. Whereas in Illinois, you can open right on the third degree and close right on the third degree. The way in which you wear your aprons and how the aprons look is also different. And what those represent is also different. What are some other differences that I can think of off the top of my head? The penalties, if I recall correctly, are different. I'm not even sure if they're always referenced in the degrees in Illinois. And again, I can't show them, but the signs are different. For example, in Illinois, right, if you are showing your different, like if you're called to order, what that means is you're going to show the signs in each degree. So if you're in the third degree and you're called to order, you're still, if I recall correctly, certainly this is true in Michigan, and I believe it's true in Illinois as well, if I recall correctly, you show the signs from all the degrees up to the third. Whereas if you're called to order in the third degree in Canada, in Ontario, you just show the signs for the third degree. And also the way the hands are placed are kind of different. There is no middle chamber lecture, but there is an equivalency in our second degree, but it's not quite the same. Trying to think what else. Are not as theatrical as well. Our degrees, emulation tends to be much less theatrical. I hope that gave some answers. I think to me, the biggest difference is the ability for a lodge of emulation, or for the ability for a lodge to open on any degree and close on that same degree, as opposed to emulation, which is you have to open in the first and move up to second and third and then back down, depending on how you want to go. That's why one thing I always recommend to applicants when they are, or not applicants, but like entered apprentice Masons in Canada, if they're planning to travel to the States, I always remind them to speak to the secretary where they're going to and make sure that they tell them that they're an entered apprentice right away, in case the lodge plan to open on the third degree. Again, historically speaking, the historical differences, to what I understand, is emulation. Again, it was formed basically through when the ancients and the moderns reunited and formed the United Grand Lodge of England. About 5 or 6 years later, that's when the emulation ritual was kind of set down, Whereas American New York Rite style, to my understanding, it was primarily written by Preston and Webb. I can't think of when it was put down. For a lot of different reasons, I'm sure, but part of it probably came from the not wanting to do things under the United Grand Lodge of England or just the English approach. What other differences? Again, the way you wear your apron is different, and York versus emulation. The aprons, I guess, represent the same things, but the way in which you wear it, the apron charges are different. The way a Master Mason's apron looks in Canada is completely different than what it is in the States, in Illinois at least. I hope that helped answer some of your questions, Brad. Let me know if that made sense to you. It's fascinating, all the differences. I know like Missouri, there's still a reference to slavery in their ritual, right? Which we don't have, obviously, in most jurisdictions anymore. So, but those, I would say, the biggest difference. The biggest difference, the ability to open and close in any degree. The Grand Master visiting a Canadian lodge can close in short order. I'm not sure if that's true or not, Dad, for here in Ontario anyways. It could be true in Manitoba. I don't know. But in Ontario, whenever I've been in lodge with the Grand Master, he always closes in the first degree. He'll go back down to the first and close there, or see the Master close. I'm trying to think of what other differences that I can think of off the top of my head between Illinois and collecting the password and passscript. Usually in Ontario, we have the option of doing so. Like if we're going from the second to the third degree, let's say, you're given the option of collecting the password and passscript, but it's rarely done. Whereas it seems like in Illinois, it's standard practice at every meeting that you collect the password and passscript of whatever degree you're at. Some slight differences in terms of officers, which officers we have versus which officers we don't have. I don't know if it's specific to emulation versus York, but in Illinois you have the Pledge of Allegiance at the start of your meetings. I know they do that in Michigan for sure, have the Pledge of Allegiance at the start of the meetings. We don't have anything similar here in Canada, either Pledge of Allegiance or kind of moving the flag. So it's fascinating to see those differences. But I do think the most fundamental difference is the ability to open and close on any degree. Although I will say your degrees themselves, like your especially your first, second, and third degree, they're much longer than our degrees, especially that latter half or the back half. It is very, very long compared to ours. I mean, I thought our degrees were long, but you have got some long degrees, especially, like I said, that back half can be killer. Welcome. If you're just joining us, please hit the like and subscribe button. Let me know how it's going and what it is that you guys want to chat about. Brad Parkinson asking about emulation versus York, which I usually think of as emulation versus Preston Webb, and what some of the differences are. We focus specifically on Illinois because we've both been to lodges in Illinois many times. And we both love Illinois Freemasonry and Freemasons. I'm actually going to be back pretty soon, so I'm looking forward to that. Wonder if I can find anything else quickly. I'm going to do a quick search on Google. Sure, there's probably like a list of differences and a bunch I'm missing. Emulation versus York. Yeah, the York work is based on the Webb rewrite. So that's probably why I usually call it the Preston Webb ritual. The York work is based on the Webb rewrite of the Preston work, a version of which has been adopted in every state except Pennsylvania. One main difference is the proficiency requirement, which must be given before advancing from one degree to the next. The Canadian proficiency requires you to give short answers to a dozen or so questions about the previous degree, as well as perhaps resetting your obligation, maybe a short lecture. It varies by lodge. The York proficiency, if done long form, is basically a play-by-play narration. Oh, interesting. So I did not know this. All right, this is a cool little thing. So I mean, I knew this, I guess, but I didn't know it was specific to the ritual. I thought it was a constitutional thing. Apparently, the reason that in the States a worshipful master always wears a hat is because in the York rite, the worship masters, I guess that's a part of the York ritual, is the worshipful master wears a hat, which I did not know that. I thought it was actually like a dress code thing put in by the lodges. I didn't know it was actually related back to York Rite itself. Um, while in Canada, they don't. So that's really, really cool. And yeah, I guess that's something I didn't mention, but I could have. Obviously, I would say in Canada, emulation, our proficiency is much more strenuous than the proficiency required in Illinois, based on what I saw. Um, Basically, because it seems like they usually do it in short form, and I've never actually seen a candidate have to prove his proficiency to move up the degrees. It seems like they never actually require that anymore. So interesting. I did not know that the wearing of a top hat was part of the York Rite ritual. I always thought it was a constitutional thing that lodges had adopted for whatever reason. So Brad, let me know if those things also answer your question. But there's another difference. Worshipful master in the States wears a hat. I think every state, right, wears a hat. Maybe not Pennsylvania, because it said they didn't adopt Preston York or Preston Webb, excuse me. But certainly every other state I've been to, the master wears a hat, whereas not so much in Canada. Different paths, the same place. No, I agree, and that's my favorite thing. That's the thing I love about Freemasonry, is you have all these different paths to potentially, hopefully, get to the same place. Hopefully a good place. I hope that everybody is doing well, though. Please take a moment, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. Brad, if you haven't done so yet, please hit like and subscribe. Don't forget as well to make sure you follow us on Patreon. It's been great to see the number of patrons we have growing, so I appreciate that very much. But I would agree. Actually, that might be a fun poll question to ask. Maybe that's what I'll do here. Does your lodge practice York or emulation? All right, I'm gonna start the poll there. Oops. No, shoot, I had to change that. Not yes, no. What I meant to say, hold on one second, let me actually get this right. Let's try this again. Does your lodge practice York or emulation ritual. York, emulation, unsure. There you go. All right, we'll try that. Don't forget, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Let me know how you're doing. And as always, what it is that you guys want to talk about. We'll give it another 20 minutes or so to an hour, and then we'll start talking about. Today, I was thinking, like I said, talking about symbolism in the TV show Lost from 2005 and how it might apply to Freemasonry. The reason being, just started rewatching that show. It's a great show. It's a lot of fun. And I thought there's some cool connections between Freemasonry I thought there was some interesting symbolism that could apply to Freemasonry. Kind of the same way we had a discussion or people wrote down in the past. We had an article written about symbolism in Westworld and the Matrix and how that could apply to Freemasonry. Oh, we got 2 votes, 2 for emulation. Does your lodge practice emulation or ritual, or emulation or York ritual? Don't forget also, if you get the chance, you can follow us on Medium. .com, where I have different articles I've written about, again, Freemasonry. The most recent one I wrote was It's More Than a Game, about gamification and Freemasonry, something I do think many Freemasons, if they're interested in growing their lodge, could potentially benefit from. Or from, I should say. I'll share the link. Give it a bit of time. I'm just going to see who else jumps on and joins us. Like I said, we've got plenty of time before we start on the main topic. So if anybody has any questions or anything they want to discuss, please let me know. And I've been talking about, I'm very much looking forward to being back home this weekend. I leave on Saturday to come back home. And then on Saturday, I'll be back home in Winnipeg, taking part in a first degree on Tuesday, which I'm looking forward to, the 25th, if I recall correctly. Yes. And then from there, I'll be hitting up another one of my favorite places in the world, Chicago. So that's going to be a blast as well. And see some good friends once again in Glenview. So as always, though, please take a moment, hit the like, hit the subscribe. Let me know how you're doing and what it is you want to chat about. Give it a bit of time. Usually takes about half an hour to an hour for the majority of people to start showing up. And so once you start to arrive, we'll pick today's subject. And thank everybody who tuned in on Monday. I really enjoyed our discussion on Freemasonry and building digital communities or digital spaces. I think that stuff is really, really critical to our ability to adapt to the modern world and the modern landscape. And I think digital spaces have a lot of value to Freemasonry that unfortunately we oftentimes do not explore, unfortunately. So let me know what you thought of that. I'm probably going to do a written article about that as well soon on Medium. Oh, three. So we got at least one American in because we got two emulation, one York in terms of the, as probably was Brad actually. Yeah, two emulation, one York in terms of the ritual. So just going to give it a bit of time, see who else joins us, jumps in the chat. Before we start on our particular topics. Of course, might be worth checking what's happening in the news. One thing I want to talk about, speaking of things in the news, is want to discuss Freemasonry in Ukraine. I've talked about Freemasonry in Russia. I actually had a gentleman on, a brother, John Meek, who talked about Freemasonry in Russia, which really, really enjoyed talking to him about that. But I haven't really talked about Freemasonry in Ukraine much. I talked a little bit about it, but I could probably go into more detail. So hopefully in the coming weeks might be worth re-exploring or revisiting Freemasonry in Ukraine once again. Also, speaking of, I talked before about my travels to the States, how much I love traveling to the States. Here in Windsor, we have the weekly tunnel bus service. It looks like it could end August 31st, special events bus by December 20th. I'm hoping it doesn't because I love that tunnel bus. So I'm very, very much hoping that we can keep the tunnel bus. A lot of people I know are saying, including some Masons, are saying they're not going to travel to the States anymore. It's my intention to keep traveling to the States, though while I'm here in Canada, I do try to buy more Canadian products. But either way, fingers crossed that we can resolve this situation and kind of Trump stops being a bully, because I love traveling to the States. I got a lot of good friends, a lot of good family, a lot of good brethren in the States, all over the States, but not least of which in Illinois. So I love to. My plan is to keep traveling there because there's usually some really awesome Masonic event happening. Like coming up, there's a first degree at Jefferson Park Masonic Temple, and then there's I believe, a fundraiser for Jefferson Park Masonic Temple as well. So I'm looking forward to both of those. But if you're just joining us, please take a moment, hit that like and subscribe button. Let me know how you're doing and what it is you guys want to talk about. Another thing I could talk about actually is the Euclid space mission, Euclid being an important title for any Freemason, or anybody who loves geometry, and all Freemasons should. Euclid releases first data on mission to map universe. This was 4 hours ago, according to this, in the DW. I'm not sure, dw.com. I'm not sure what DW stands for. The telescope aims to eventually chart 1/3 of the sky during its mission, capturing galaxies and stars. Scientists hope it will also shed light on the role of dark energy and dark matter in the universe. The European Space Agency on Wednesday released its first batch of data from the Euclid Space Telescope's mission to create a 3D map of the universe. In unprecedented detail, the telescope launched from Florida in 2023 is currently hovering 1.5 million kilometers above Earth. Over the course of its 6-year mission, Euclid is expected to chart 1/3 of the sky, encompassing 1.5 billion galaxies. Might be worth revisiting the Euclid space mission once more, and maybe even taking a few minutes to revisit some of the interviews I've done about the Euclid space mission, both in writing as well as via the podcast. Welcome. If you're just joining us, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. I would have preferred to go up the Scottish right side. Do you mean in terms of when you say I would have preferred to go up? Do you mean ritual wise, or do you mean like Scottish versus York right in terms of the actual like? Because obviously, when I hear Scottish York or Scottish right side, I think of here in Canada are appendant bodies, right? We have the Scottish right appendant body, the York right appendant body, which are kind of usually people describe it as the York side or the Scottish right side. There's an interesting difference, right? York here in Canada or in Ontario, is York usually refers to the York right, one of the appendant bodies. I'm not sure which states do have the options, which states don't, but I think look both, whether it's emulation or York degree, it's still it's still Masonic ritual at the end of the day. And like for me, even though I came up through the emulation side of things, I've always enjoyed being in, Preston Webb lodges and I've always really enjoyed Preston Webb ritual as much as I enjoy my emulation. And there are certain little things that are interesting. Certainly the ability to open and close from a degree can be a really nice touch if you've had a long night and you just want to get it over with and you still have to go all the way down from the third back to the first. So there's lots of benefits to doing it this way. But each type of degree has its own charms, if that's the right word. But it would be interesting to know if there are any states that give lodges the option as to how they want to open and close. That could be fascinating, to open and close between the first degree, second degree, or to use either type of ritual. I think most states, most jurisdictions are going to be pretty set on one type of ritual as opposed to having the option of two. But that would be fascinating to see between each of those, and to see how it works. So that would be pretty cool, though. Just 1 second. But certainly in terms of like York versus Scottish, right? You can do both. I know a lot of people who've done York right and Scottish right, so. All right, I'll be back in just 1 second. 4 votes, two emulation, 1 York, 1 unsure. So there you go. All right, I'll be back in a moment. Don't go too far. All right, I'm back. The Scottish Rite first 3 craft degrees. Louisiana offers the first 3 degrees of the Scottish Rite. See, this is interesting, and this is one of those things where I think a lot of it is kind of the terminology that's used. They can get kind of tricky. See, for me, when I hear the first 3 degrees, right, I think of the usual term here in Ontario, and I believe emulation in general, would be either Blue Lodge or Craft Lodge. And then from there, you can either join the Scottish Rite or the York Rite. And if you want to join Scottish Rite, you join first the Lodge of Perfection, which is your 4th degree to your 14th degree. You then have your Rose Quad, which is 15th to 18th degree, and then you have your Consistory, which is 19th to 32nd. On the other side of it, you have your York Rite, which you have your Knights Templar, and I don't know all of the details in terms of which, like how the degree structure there works. I'm not an expert on the York Rite side of it. And then you can have the Shrine as well, I suppose, on a side note. The first 3 degrees of Scottish Rite, in my experience, would be 4th degree, 5th degree, 6th degree. Now, again, I have heard of our ritual, emulation ritual, also referred to as Scottish ritual. So I've heard it referred to that way as well. In the same way, I've heard the American ritual referred to as both York ritual and Preston Webb ritual. So it's kind of the terminology of it all. So what I assume when you say Louisiana offers the first 3 degrees of Scottish Rite, what you're referring to is kind of emulation or Scottish 1st, 2nd, and 3rd degree, as opposed to Preston and Webb. Most states in the U.S. do not offer the Scottish Rite craft degrees. Yeah, I was not aware of any off the top of my head that offered it, but the fact that Louisiana does is really interesting. And a really cool little piece of trivia. So thank you for sharing that, because I was not aware. Like I said, I always kind of think of the states as being Preston and Webb. There are some, and when I think Scottish Rite, I don't think so. To me, Scottish Rite, again, because of Ontario and the way the Ontario jurisdiction works, I wouldn't call. So the craft degree references, craft lodge is 1st, 2nd, 3rd degree. Scottish Rite degrees are Lodge of Perfection, Rose Quad, Consistory, which is 4th degree and up. Like I would never use the phrase Scottish Rite craft degree, even though I have heard of our ritual being described as Scottish ritual before. I tend to call it, well, actually, to be honest, I just tend to call our ritual, and then when referring to the states, I might refer to Preston and Webb ritual, or sometimes I refer to ours as Scottish ritual. But Scottish Rite, like I said, here in Ontario, it'd be referencing 4th degree and up. Craft Lodge, craft degrees references 1st, 2nd, and 3rd degree exclusively, if that makes any sense. That's not, again, though, I have heard in the past references to things like Scottish ritual here in Canada, here in Ontario, I should say. And that obviously references, because emulation ritual really dates back to Scottish operative Freemasonry, which dates back to what, the 17th or the 15th century. You can take it pretty far back. If that made any sense, Brad, I hope that it did. And welcome. If you're just joining us, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Let me know how you're doing, and let me know what it is that you want to talk about. Let me know if what I said makes sense to you when it comes to the differences between York Rite, Scottish Rite, Craft Lodge, how we refer to Craft Lodge here in Ontario, and what it means. It is like that is a super fascinating part about Freemasonry, I think, is kind of these unique little differences, even in terminology, right? Everybody thinks, or not everybody, um, everybody has their own terminology. Courtney is here. How's it going, Courtney? Good to see you again. Hope that you're doing well. The Scottish Rite has their own craft degrees. Well, do they have their own craft degrees, or is it that I have to do some more research into this? I mean, okay, so the first the first 3 degrees, I think they were revised in 1872. But like I said, they are the craft degrees. It's, to my understanding, it's what we practice here in Ontario as well as England. But they're emulation ritual, if I recall correctly. Now, if there is specific Scottish Rite degrees or Blue Lodge, you hear that phrase a lot, right? Blue Lodge degrees. But I think that they're emulation, right? Like they're emulation degrees. They're not specific to Scottish Rite. Right, because in 1857, Pike completed first revision of 4th to 32nd ritual and printed 100 copies. The ancient Scottish Rite has Rite comprising 33 degrees. The first 3 degrees are administered by the Blue Lodges or symbolic lodges. They are called Blue degrees. The 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite are conferred by several controlling bodies. The first of these is the Craft Blue Lodge, which confers the entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason degrees. Craft Blue Lodges operate under the authority of a state grand lodges, not the Supreme Council. So, yeah, we have to double check this, but I think the first 2 degrees, to my knowledge, are not Scottish Rite degrees. They are, you need to get them to go beyond that, but they are at the end of the day conferred and administered by the various state jurisdictions and not by any ancient accepted Scottish Rite bodies. So, most Freemasons don't know that Scottish Rite is a complete system 1 through 33. I mean, I didn't even know that, to be honest. I want to double check this because I feel like, so when you get your first 3 degrees, let's say in Louisiana, who is conferring, like, who is the authority under which you are receiving those degrees? It'd be the Grand Lodge of Louisiana, right? As opposed to the southern jurisdiction of Scottish Rite. Like the degrees themselves are still conferred by conferred under the authority and by the Grand Lodges, by the Grand Lodge, not by any Scottish Rite body. Now, that's not to say that the ritual could not be Scottish, like we would call it, emulation degree, as opposed to say, like it's the emulation degree. I'll have to check into that more, but thank you for sharing that, Brad. Yeah, my understanding, so again, I could very well have been wrong. My understanding was always the first 3 degrees are under the authority and conferred by state level Grand Lodges or UGLE or whatever it is. And they can be Scottish ritual or emulation ritual or Preston Webb ritual. And then after that, the remaining degrees are actually conferred by the Scottish Rite Authority and under the auspices of them, as opposed to under the authority of the Grand Lodges. That's how I always understood it. When you say complete system, do you mean like Scottish ritual? Like it was Scottish Rite Freemasonry that created the ritual for the first 3 degrees, which I don't think that was the case, but I know they modified it. They modified it in 1872, I think is when it got modified. So but I will have to do some more research on this. I mean, I'm an 18th degree Scottish Rite Mason myself, so you'd think I would know more about this stuff. But even when you say, where is it that you put it up here, Brad? Louisiana offers the first 3 degrees of the Scottish Rite. Again, when you say that, what I'm referring you're saying is the Grand Lodge of Louisiana can confer the first 3 degrees with either Preston Webb ritual or emulation or Scottish Rite ritual. Because my knowledge, emulation and Scottish Rite is the same ritual. Or if it's something different and there is a separate set of 3 degrees written by Scottish Rite, I'd have to check that out and learn more about that. It'd be really cool. But again, this is something that you're teaching me about. So I very, very much appreciate it. In the meantime, if you are just joining us, thank you so much for being here. Please take a moment, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let me know how it's going, what it is you want to talk about. I usually do these streams Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, but yesterday I had a cold, which I still have a bit of that cold today. I'm still getting over it. So I'm feeling kind of feeling better than I did yesterday, and hopefully tomorrow I'll feel better than I did today. But in the meantime, I did miss yesterday's live stream, but I'm very happy to be back here today. I have done the first 3 degrees of a craft lodge. So I've done the first 2 degrees of craft lodge or blue lodge, call it what you will. But I've also received my 18th degree, up to 18th degree in Scottish Rite. So Rose Qua. The Grand Lodge of Louisiana allows the Scottish Rite to confer the first 3 degrees. Most other states don't. See, that's really, really interesting. To my knowledge, here in Ontario, the Scottish Rite cannot confer the first 3 degrees. Now, you can have like a Scottish Rite degree team where they will get a bunch of, Scottish Rite Masons to, show up and sit in chairs, but they'll be showing up. They'll be known as like it's the Scottish Rite guys or whatever it is, but they'll be showing up as Masons, as members of their mother lodge, not as Scottish Rite per se, if that makes sense. And then so that's interesting. I was not aware of any jurisdiction that allowed Scottish Rite to confer the first 3 degrees. So that's a really cool little piece of trivia. I'll have to contact Louisiana and see if I can learn more about this. Because, like I said, it's something that I did not know about. So when the Grand Lodge of Louisiana, Brad, to your knowledge, when the Grand Lodge of Louisiana allows Scottish Rite to confer the first 3 degrees, and most other states don't, are they using emulation ritual, which is what I would assume, or are they using Preston Webb or York ritual? Like, I would assume that the Scottish Rite Louisiana first degree would look similar to what I'm used to here in Ontario. But I would need to check that out to learn more. But maybe I'll see if I can get in touch with Louisiana. I want to go to at some point or another Louisiana. I've never been there before. The Scottish Rite first 3 degrees are considerably different. Google Michael Pole Scottish Rite craft degree. All right, let me check this out. Michael Pole Scottish Rite craft degrees. So this is more than dogma of the Scottish Rite craft degrees. A conversation with Michael Pole. Those, oh, interesting. The Freemason for Dummies, Chris Hodap did a blog post on it. Those notorious first 3 Scottish Rite degrees. I've often opined everything important I know about life I learned from the movies. Well, in all my years, I ain't never heard, seen, nor smelled an issue that was so dangerous. Michael Pole, editor, was apparently recently invited to speak to a U.S. Masonic research group on the lone subject of the 3 craft lodge degrees worked within what became called the Scottish Rite. Only to be disinvited. The short summary is that, yes, the Scottish Rite really does possess their own French-derived rituals for the EA, FC, and MM degrees, even though almost no American Freemasons have seen them, and the rites here say they only confer degrees 4th through 33rd. Yes, these very different craft lodge degrees, sometimes referred to as the Red Lodge degrees, really are worked in Louisiana, New York, California, D.C., and Hawaii in perfectly regular, recognized charter Masonic lodges under their state Grand Lodge. And yes, if your Grand Lodge is in amity with those states, nothing should prevent you from visiting them and experiencing these degree rituals in person, much less just hearing about them. Just out of curiosity, if different craft rituals are hearsay in the US, how the hell does Pennsylvania get a pass? So that is very interesting. Like I said, I had no idea that the Scottish Rite had their own French-derived EA, FC, and MM degrees. Nor that these degrees were practiced in at least Louisiana, though apparently I'm also learning New York, California, DC, and Hawaii. And so I'm a little bit curious. I'd love to know more about the logistics of it. Like, so in Louisiana, if they are conferring a Scottish Rite EA degree, is it Scottish Rite that's conferring it with permission of the Grand Lodge of Louisiana? Or is it, a craft lodge is conferring it under the auspices of the Grand Lodge of Louisiana, but they're using ritual that came from the Scottish Rite side of it? Like, so I guess the question is the ritual Scottish Rite, or is the actual entirety of the degree, including who's doing it, is it under the Scottish Rite auspices? That is fascinating, though. Thank you for sharing this information with me, Brad. Like I said, I had no idea. My understanding up until about 2 minutes ago was that the, Scottish Rite could only and exclusively confer degrees 4 to 32, 33rd degree being an honorary degree, and that the first 2 degrees were exclusively under the jurisdiction of a Grand Lodge jurisdiction. So the fact that there is a Scottish Rite EA, FC, and MM degree is fascinating. Apparently, like I said, it exists in 5 states, according to Chris Hodap: Louisiana, New York, California, DC, and Hawaii. And it says here, so these degrees are worked in Louisiana, New York, California, DC, and Hawaii in perfectly regular, recognized chartered Masonic lodges under their state Grand Lodges. So does that mean that, again, the state Grand Lodge is the one conferring it, but using ritual that was written for Scottish Rite? I've never heard of it being done in Canada. I've never heard of a Scottish Rite craft degree being done in Canada. I've heard Scottish ritual as a phrase, but never what you're saying there in terms of. So that's really cool. Thank you, Brad, for sharing. I've never witnessed the emulation ritual and the third degree in Canada or England. You are missing out. I've seen third degrees in Illinois and Michigan, and I've seen third degrees obviously here in Canada. And Ontario, I should say. I am a big fan of our third degrees. I think your third degree is much more, what's the word I'm thinking of? Is much more theatrical, whereas ours, it feels more solemn and somber, if that makes any sense. So I'm a big fan of our third degree. So hopefully you'll get the chance to check out an emulation third degree at some point. It'd be great to see you share. But thank you, Brad, for sharing that information. That is something new, and maybe, who knows? Maybe one thing I can do one day is get somebody from Louisiana on to talk about Freemasonry and particularly these degrees, and how particularly maybe what the feedback is from candidates or from those who've seen these 3 degrees. Also, on a side note, speaking of American jurisdictions, I am trying my best to. Oh, so that's another thing, Brad, by the way. You mentioned differences between York and emulation. In my experience, emulation is less theatrical, but I mean that in more of a positive way. It's more solemn, whereas in York, sometimes it tends to be a little bit more goofing around and fooling around during ceremonies, in my experience. One thing that's the same I've noticed, though, in each degree is the final charge. I don't know why, but in my experience, Illinois, Michigan, a couple other places, even if 90% of the degree is different, the final charge to the candidate is the same in both my jurisdiction and many jurisdictions in the States. I'm not sure why, but yeah, I found that's a really interesting piece of trivia. Welcome, by the way. If you're just joining us, please don't forget, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Thank you, Brad, for sharing something I did not know. CD has joined us. Hey, CD, I hope you're doing well. It's been a little while, so thank you for being back. I would have been here on my stream yesterday, but as you may have heard, I'm getting over a cold, which has been a pain in the butt. But CD, I hope that you are doing well. Let me know how it's going. We've been talking about ritual work, and I just learned something new that I had no idea. So thank you, Brad, for teaching me something new. I really appreciate it. We have got, by the way, does your lodge practice York emulation ritual? Unsure, 57%, emulation 29%, York 14%. So York is, emulation is up there. Unsure is at the top, though. And Courtney, thank you for congratulations above. I really appreciate it. And Courtney, I hope that you are doing well as always. And don't forget, for anybody who has signed up for my Patreon at a paid level, even $3 a month, I'm this weekend, or actually before I leave for home, I'm going to be finally mailing out some of those correspondence. So make sure if you signed up for, a paid monthly level, you included contact information so I can mail you a special piece of correspondence as a thank you. And we got 10 likes, it looks like, so far. So thank you so much to everybody who's hit the like button. As always, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let me know how you're doing and what it is that you guys want to talk about. So you're dealing with you got a bit of a thing happening too. Then yeah, I've been dealing with this stupid. I came down with a cold last week on Thursday, and I felt like crap all day Thursday. Spent the whole day in bed. Friday, Saturday felt so much better. And I thought to myself, like, all right, I must be getting over it. And thank God I was feeling better because I had some professional wrestling to do those 2 days. So felt so much better. Then on Sunday, started to feel crappy again. And then Monday felt absolutely terrible. So I'm sorry about your upset stomach. I hope it gets better as well. Tea with honey or Sprite. Those are always my two connections. One thing I was thinking of talking about today is some symbolism in Lost and how I think it could maybe be of benefit or could connect to Freemasonry. So I thought that'd be fascinating as well. But it's good to have you on the channel. And thank you, everybody. We got 9 people watching, which is awesome. Thank you, everybody who's joined. If you are just joining us, please hit the like button, hit that subscribe button. Both of those things are so important. Share, etc., etc. I'm just going to share this with a couple more people, see if we get a couple more people on. My friend who's visiting just called my cat a boy. She is not. Bandit is a girl. What are the grand principles upon which it is founded? Depends on the jurisdiction, but I mean, I would say brotherly love, relief, and truth. But you could argue when it comes to to me, the grand principle of Freemasonry, this is just my opinion more than anything else, is the grand principle upon which it is founded is the principle that the world can be made better through the application of brotherly love, relief, and truth. That's something I've always believed about Freemasonry, though it took me a while to know how to properly um, state it. But I think that is kind of what I view as the grand principle upon which it is founded, the belief the world can be made better through the application of brotherly love, relief, and truth. I hope everybody who is just joining us is doing well. I'm going to invite a couple people before maybe I switch over and start my discussion on um, interesting enough in terms of does your lodge practice York or emulation rituals? York, 12%, emulation, 25%, unsure, 62%. So more unsure than anything else. Interestingly, at Refreshment Masonic Video Podcast, the Tallest the Cedar just put out an episode, which anyone wants to check that one out. But CD, I hope that you start to feel better soon. And thank you so much for being Let me see if I can. Yeah, I'm all right. A little bit of cold, not so bad. We'll survive. CD, hey Courtney, hey all. Let's welcome everybody who is just joining us. Thank you so much for uh, being here. Next week, I am going to be traveling. I'm going to be out of town, so I will not have the usual schedule, but I am still going to try my best to do my daily live streams. What I'll do is I will make sure to post on social media the different dates or the different times, I should say, in particular, of when I'll be doing these live streams. You want to make sure people can track them down and find them. You get to see me do some live streams from Winnipeg and from Chicago. Last time I did my live stream from Illinois, I actually did a discussion and topic on on Freemasonry in Illinois and the history of Freemasonry in Illinois, which was really, really fun, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm still working on my schedules or my topics for next week. Beyond the Blue Lodge, Cameron, do you feel that an individual could possibly learn a lot more about the craft, perhaps? Well, I mean, there's always more to learn. Even I just learned something new today that I didn't know about, right? Which was, again, the fact that the Scottish Rite has its own French-derived rituals for the EA, FC, and MM degrees. So there's always more to learn. That's one of my favorite things about this forum and being online is the fact that potentially you can learn things you didn't know before. And that, I mean, in Freemasonry, they always talk about this idea of the importance of making a daily advancement in Masonic knowledge, which I think is so critical. And so I love the idea of always learning, and there's different ways to do it, right? Online, there's a wealth of knowledge, and there is a wealth of valuable information that you can kind of apply to your Masonic studies. You can go to the library, though. You can find books in your Masonic temple or in your Masonic lodge. I mean, there's a million ways that you can kind of grow in your Masonic knowledge, and that's kind of the most fun part about it. So hopefully, Courtney, every day people are learning something new, and also making sure you understand that you don't know everything, and there's always more to learn. One of the, I think, biggest challenges we have in Freemasonry sometimes is we get to a point where we start to feel like we must have learned everything or we know everything, and because we start to feel that way, we can kind of there can be this tendency to get complacent, which is never a good thing. Yeah, I think earned is the right way to put it. No, I think saying it's an earned degree is absolutely the best way to put it. So, um, so yeah, and again, the fact that the thing I learned today, the brand new thing, was the fact that Scottish Rite also has its first 3 degrees, its own unique first 2 degrees, which is not something I was aware of. So I thought that was pretty cool as well, and a fun thing to be shared. Spirit of Justice, we do York. Welcome, Spirit. Thank you for being. Yeah. So, welcome, Spirit, by the way. Good to have you join. How long does it take to go through? It depends on the jurisdiction, Courtney. That's the really interesting thing about it. The jurisdiction will in American go from 4 to 33rd. Sometimes you can. I know, for example, it depends on the jurisdiction. So in Ontario, it takes usually about 6 or 7 months, give or take. Um, So I think, and there are some places now where they're even trying to get the first 3 degrees to take place all in one, all in a single degree, all in a single day. I know as well. So it's unfortunate to see kind of some, but I guess it depends, right? Or it's a weekend almost. So I know, for example, Spirit. I think there are some jurisdictions where it's over a weekend. Here in Ontario, to go from your 4th to 32nd, anyways, you need to you go 4th to 14th over one day, and then a few months later you do 15th to 18th another day, and then usually a few months after that you do 19th to 32nd, and then the 33rd you have to kind of get it earned over time. So if that makes any sense. But welcome, Spirit. Thank you so much. It's great to have you join us as well. They don't petition. I mean, they can informally petition, I suppose, right? They could always run around and say they want it, but no, it's at least here in Ontario, it's, to my knowledge, you're not petitioned for it. People have to decide whether or not they want you to have it or not. So it really does just depend on the person and the 33rd, other 33rds basically have to decide whether or not they want you to have it. So every year there'll be a different names put forward, and they'll kind of decide amongst themselves. I'm not even a 32nd, I'm 18th degree, so I don't know to what extent for sure it's there, but as soon as I know, but like I said, I don't know exactly the process, but it's not a petition thing. It's decided where names will be put forward based on your contributions to Freemasonry as well as Scottish Rite, and you kind of go from there. But I hope everybody is doing well. Please hit that like and subscribe button. It's not a standard degree. It's definitely not a standard degree. You could argue what is standard, right? But no, it's not a standard degree in the sense that there's no real, it's not like a ritual thing where you advance. It's it's an honorary degree given to people who deserve it due to their Masonic commitments. So but then again, you could always argue, what is standard? Part of life is the fact that, or part of Freemasonry is the fact that there oftentimes is nothing standard about it. That's the fun part. Advancement. Well, we talk about that actually in the idea of gamification of Freemasonry, right? Or gamifying Freemasonry, and what that can mean in terms of the idea of advancement. Some people are really dedicated to or interested in this idea of advancing in their degrees and what that actually looks like. So for a lot of people, the way to keep them engaged in Freemasonry is to potentially give them things by which they can advance to or earn, including, getting a 33rd degree. So advancement is oftentimes a very powerful tool by which you can pick your term, by which you can drive engagement or keep people coming out, which I think is the best approach to take, actually, in a lot of circumstances, is give them something to work towards, give them something to look forward to, give them something to keep working towards, It can't be the only thing, because sooner or later you are going to run out of titles, right? You can only give people so many titles before they start to feel like those things aren't important anymore. But for the time being, I think it's still super useful. So I hope everybody is doing well. Please, if you're just joining us, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let me know how you're doing. I know Spirit is here. We got CD here. Thank you, everybody who's joined. We were talking about the differences between emulation and York rite, or York ritual, I should say. And then I learned something brand new, which is the idea that there is a difference between the York. I mean, there is such a thing as Scottish Rite craft degrees, which I guess are conferred in, amongst other places, Louisiana, which is something I did not know, I was not aware of. All right, so I I missed my stream yesterday, unfortunately, due to feeling ill, although I'm feeling better today, and hopefully I feel even better tomorrow. But I think I may call this stream early today. Give me a chance to take care of some other work I have to do. Keep checking back in, though, with Scoring Comes Promotions. I'll be back tomorrow for another 1 p.m. live stream. Hope to see everybody there. Follow us on social media. The reason being, I'm going to be changing the time, so pay attention. Does a person ask me a 33rd degree? I mean, it's rather selective. You can ask, I suppose, but asking is not going to be the way you get it, right? You have to. I feel like asking probably would not be that helpful, to be honest. You might even get you more negative views, but that's kind of a whole separate can of tuna. But no, it's selective. It is selectively decided. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. Hope you guys are doing well. I am going to be taking off for today's stream, but I will be back tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern. And maybe tomorrow what I'll do is I'll talk about Freemasonry and Lost, or some of the symbolism I saw in that TV show. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good day, and bye for now.